Arrange myself a little bit here. All right, I'm not on mute. No. The reading today is a poem, Fancy in Nubibus, or The Poet in the Clouds by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. It is pleasant with a heart at ease, just after sunset or by moonlight skies, to make the shifting clouds be what you please, or let the easily persuaded eyes own each quaint likeness issuing from the mold of a friend's fancy, or with head bent low and cheek aslant, see rivers flow of gold twixt crimson banks, and then, a traveler, go from mount to mount through cloudland, gorgeous land, or listening to the tide with closed sight, be that blind bard who on the Cayenne strand, by those deep sounds possessed with inward light, beheld the Iliad and Odyssey rise to the swelling of the voiceful sea. Good morning.
Good morning.
That was Fancy in Nubibus, or The Poet in the Clouds by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. The poem speaks to the fact that we can look into the skies at the clouds and see what we wish to see. But is what we are seeing truth? Truth. What is truth? If you've heard other homilies that I've given, you know that I love to provide a definition for the topic we're discussing. And today's not going to be any different. So Merriam-Webster defines truth as the body of real things, events, and facts, the state of being the case, of being in accord with fact or reality. Okay, there are several other definitions, but I think that's enough. Although, it's kind of funny to look for a definition to explain truth. Actually, it's kind of funny to look for any definition. Who is this Merriam-Webster? And who decided what the true definition of anything that we look up is? I lied a little bit. Merriam-Webster does have one other definition for truth. They label it as an archaic definition, one that was utilized before the 12th century. And that definition of truth is fidelity and constancy. Truth is fidelity and constancy, being faithful and accurate and constant and unchanging. I find that archaic definition the most interesting, as I'm not sure that we often see a lot of truth that remains faithful, constant, and unchanging. As a matter of fact, what I've seen of what we call truth is more like looking at the clouds. As Samuel Taylor Coleridge stated in his poem, to make the shifting clouds be what you please, or let the easily persuaded eye own each quaint likeness issuing from the mold of a friend's fancy. Truth is like those shifting clouds. We see each see something different, or we allow ourselves to be persuaded to see what someone else has told us that they see. Truth comes in many forms. There are physical truths or scientific truths, those truths that explain things in our physical world. And there are spiritual truths, those beliefs that we hold inside. So let's start with physical truth, because you can view that truth, right? Physical or scientific truths are based on clear observations of physical reality. They're not a collection of subjective opinions, but instead are based on observed phenomena in a way that can be repeated and tested. But does observing something make it true? When I go to bed at night, I sleep on the left side of my bed. I can lie there and observe the fact that I'm sleeping on the left side, right? But if I get up and stand at the foot of my bed and look at the spot that I sleep in, now it's the right side of my bed. If I sit on my kitchen floor, I don't know why I want to do this, but if I sit on my kitchen floor and draw the number 9 on the floor in front of me with a marker, and you walk in and stand in front of me, you're going to see the number 6. Hey, I got one more for you. I'll show you an example. I take this hand sanitizer and I rotate the pump on the hand sanitizer in a clockwise direction. I'm going in a clockwise direction, right? I keep going and I flip this bottle upside down. That clockwise direction now becomes a counterclockwise direction. So if truth is an observed phenomena that I can keep repeating, that works for my examples. Every time I lie in my bed, I'm lying on the left-hand side. But I can also repeatedly stand at the foot of my bed. And then the side that I'm lying on is the right side. So even physical truth depends on perspective. What is truth? Let's take a look at it from a more scientific perspective. How about looking at gravity? Greek philosopher Aristotle in the 4th century BC theorized that objects moved towards their natural place and fell proportionately to their weight. 2,000 years later, Galileo found that objects fell with the same acceleration rate regardless of their weight. Sir Isaac Newton described gravity as an ever-present force. The more mass an object has, the stronger the force, and the further objects are away from each other, the more the force weakens. In 1915, Albert Einstein came up with his theory of general relativity and stated that space was affected by the objects around it, that a mass can warp, bend, or change space. Objects with more mass bend the fabric of space and time more and push other objects towards them. Now, just an interesting side note. It seems pretty relative to where we are today, but both Sir Isaac Newton and Galileo experienced pandemics or plagues. Newton actually thrived during his social distancing and made some of his greatest discoveries, including gravity, after being sent home from Cambridge University when the Great Plague hit London in 1665. Galileo's experience was a little different. During the bubonic plague that hit Italy in 1630 to 1631, he was forced by the Inquisition to recant his proclamation that the earth revolved around the sun. He was found guilty of heresy and was sentenced to house arrest, where he remained until his death. All right, so side note aside, just thought that was interesting. So Aristotle, Galileo, and there were a lot of others throughout time, Newton and Einstein, all had slightly differing understandings about the truth of gravitation. Theories, their own truths. And most of us, well, we don't really study gravity, so we listen to the most common truth. And in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, someone may come up with a different truth about gravity, or someone else may discover something that totally changes our understanding of gravity. What is truth? Let's take a look at mathematics. Maybe we can find truth there. Mathematics, by the way, always my weakest subject in school, closely followed by science. So these two were a little tough. So I'm not going to explain these theories well, but the Fibonacci sequence and the golden ratio seem to explain many things in the world around us. The golden ratio, an irrational number equal to approximately 1.618, is reflected in the proportions of the human body, animals, plants, atoms, DNA, sacred texts, and ancient art and architecture. The Fibonacci sequence, generated by the Fibonacci numbers, is a spiral where each number is created by adding together the two numbers preceding it in the sequence. And apparently every number in the Fibonacci sequence perfectly reflects the golden ratio. Things like the galaxy, pine cones, sunflowers, seashells, beehives, and hurricanes all appear to reflect this sequence. So what does this mean? Does it mean that the universe was created with a calculator or a compass? I really don't know, to be honest, except that I was able to find articles that also talked about the fact that this golden ratio or Fibonacci sequence is not really found in everything that we think it is. Those naysaying articles say that there's a bit of a myth to these sequences, and although they're found in many of the places that we think they aren't necessarily everywhere in nature. Sometimes the correlation to the sequence is just a coincidence. What is truth? All right, let's take a look at truth from a spiritual perspective. You know what? I don't like math or science, but this is actually much more difficult, isn't it? And I thought science and math were the toughest ones. There's so many different beliefs, and can we call a belief a truth? Does everyone believe that we are eternal? That life continues after we leave these bodies? Well, all of us here probably do, but there are many people whose truth is that this is all there is. They believe that there's nothing after this life. Does everyone believe that there's an infinite intelligence, a God? Again, there are people who do not accept or believe in the existence of deity or deities. And for those of us who do believe in a source, many of us have different versions of that supreme being. When I was a child in Catholic school, I was taught about the Catholic version of God. Yet I somehow knew that my God was going to be whatever God someone believed in when they got to those pearly gates. My God would be Allah or Shiva or Yahweh or Satnam or Kami. Because I believed it, does that make it true? Again, I really don't know. So what is truth? Let's look again at my original examples for physical truths. I can't really say if it's true that I'm sleeping on the left side of my bed, but I can say that it's true that I'm sleeping in a bed. I can't really say what the number is that I drew on the floor. I thought I was drawing a 9, but if someone else is reading it as a 6, then maybe I didn't truly draw a 9. But I can say that it's true that I drew a number on my floor. I can't say if I'm rotating the pump on my hand sanitizer clockwise or counterclockwise, but it's true that I'm rotating the pump. Back to our talk about gravity. Aristotle, Galileo, Newton, and Einstein each believed their own truth to explain gravity. But would Einstein's theory of relativity have come to be if it hadn't been for those who came before him? So each version of truth throughout time helped to contribute to the next version that would come after it, all trying to explain a force that keeps us from floating off into space and keeps the planets aligned and not colliding with each other. That force is a truth. I don't know what the golden ratio or the Fibonacci sequence truly mean. They could be scientific, they could be proof of infinite intelligence. I don't really know. But I do know that the underlying truth is that whether or not we realize it, these sequences have contributed to how we perceive universal beauty, both natural and man-made. And for spiritual truth, well, as a child, I was always aware that there was an underlying truth to the concept of God, one that could be interpreted in several different ways, even in the belief that there is no supreme deity and we are all that there is. But spiritual truths are not observable. They are not repeatable. So how can anyone tell someone else that their truth is wrong? Speaking of God reminds me of when I finally told my parents about this spiritual journey I'm on. It took me 2 years before I sat down with my Catholic conservative parents to tell them that I was in the midst of a spiritual awakening and was doing work as a psychic medium. And when I did, I was most afraid of how my very conservative Catholic black and white father was going to react. He listened to me quietly, and when I'd finished, he looked at me and said, "Let me ask you a question. Is God a man or a woman? Well, I was a little flamboozled, as that was probably the last thing I expected to come out of his mouth. I don't even really remember what I answered. Something about both, maybe? Anyway, he looked at me and said, "Wrong. God is neither. We can't explain what God is. God is a concept that is too great for us to understand." And maybe my father unwittingly gave me the answer to what truth is. After watching a documentary on the Fibonacci sequence, I asked Spirit for some guidance to help me understand. That sequence kind of confused me. Told you math wasn't my strong suit. If everything in the universe had a mathematical sequence or a formula to it, what did that mean for free will? Did everything have to match up to some type of formula? And did that mean that everything is destined and there's no free will? The answer I got was a drawing or a symbol. They drew me an infinity symbol, but an infinity symbol with a stem or almost like a balloon string on it. It represented us. In our bodies, in this dimension, we are the stem to the source, the feet to the head that we came from. We are free to wave in any direction that we like. We do have free will. Our bodies are wondrous. The earth is wondrous. We are still connected to our source, the infinity symbol. We are part of it, but we're also somewhat separated. So maybe, as my father said in his explanation for God, maybe here in this reality, this dimension, we can't really understand truth. Maybe we won't fully comprehend it until we're once again part of the source. But in the meantime, we continue to search for it and we look for explanations, for clues, for hints. We try to make sense of everything around us through science, through math, through faith, through mythology. And the more that we learn, the more that questions that we have. Truth is like a cloud. It continues to change depending on where we're standing and what we're expecting to see. Our perspective can change a 9 to a 6 or the right to the left. Let me give you one last example. The other day I was sitting out on my deck and I spotted a yellow bird perched in a tree limb. The brilliant yellow color brought me such a simple and complete joy as I watched it closely. And I watched it and I watched it. Wait, it still hadn't moved. So I got up to look at it more closely, and it turns out that brilliant yellow bird that brought me joy was actually a brilliant yellow leaf in the tree. The underlying truth was that something had brought me joy. Did it matter whether I believed that leaf was a bird? Or is what mattered the truth that I had discovered a wave of joy? Which, by the way, was pretty short-lived because it's way too early for me to be seeing leaves that have changed colors. Maybe what we really need to understand is that what matters about truth is the underlying principle, not the smaller perspectives that we uncover to lead us to that truth. Instead of allowing ourselves just to see what's in front of us, we need to look from another perspective, knowing that all of those truths are shifting clouds seen from an individual perspective and leading us all to a larger, more complete truth. So let me leave you with a quote from Richard Bach. A cloud does not know why it moves in just such a direction and at such a speed. It feels an impulsion. This is the place to go now. But the sky knows the reasons and the patterns behind all the clouds. And you will know too when you lift yourself high enough to see beyond horizons. Thank you.
Thank you.